Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Hi, Cece.
Hi, Tricia. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent. A little cold in Cincinnati right now.
Okay. I think it's cold all over the country. It's just weird. Although I'm in Colorado and I looked in Wyoming and Montana and it's like 10 degrees warmer there than here. And I thought, that seems wrong, but okay.
Yeah, that does seem wrong.
Yeah. Today we have author Cece Robinson. Is it a YA series? It's YA.
It's a
right?
YA dystopian series.
YA
Yes.
dystopian author, and I'm super excited to dive in. This is one of my favorite genres. So I'm going to be one clicking after I learn all about this. And I know you have a new release, February 25th of 25, right?
I moved it because of all the drama with Amazon. I'm moving it to the 27th. There's evidently a boycott happening on the day it was supposed to release on the 28th. I know, right? I'm like, okay, indie authors live on Amazon. This is how we live. And
yes, well, you're messing up our plans.
Yes.
Yeah. And we just will hope and pray that, people keep buying our books, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, the name of the series is Divided. Is the whole series named Divided? And
the whole series,
okay,
yes, is named Divided.
Divided is named Divided as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, jump in, tell us about the characters, the world. I want to know everything.
All right, so I write from 4 points of view, so that's a lot of fun. And I think it kind of represents that found family vibe that we love so much in YA to see from all these different characters' heads. But each book in the series features one character as the main person who advances the plot. So in the first book, Divided, that is Marcos. And Marcos is desperate for escape. I know there's a lot of teenagers today who might feel the same way he does, except he has towering walls that are not only cement block, glass top, barbed wire top, and guarded, they're also sonic enforced. But he figures out a way out, because of course he does. And he gets out of the city, and then he gets caught. And he ends up in a labor camp, more walls, and it's way worse than ever he could have imagined life would be. But while he's there, he encounters an underground resistance movement and meets other people his age who are not from his area, who don't look like him. He's Hispanic and he's never seen someone from another ethnicity. And this is eye-opening for him. So when he's there, he decides, I'm going to get involved in this rebel movement and we're going to free the camp, as you do when you're 18 and you find yourself in a labor camp. And lo and behold, the whole story is about how they all connect together, the 4 different main characters coming together and working to free this labor camp. And the novellas are, which Deception is a novella. It is meant to be read in between Divided and Caged. Caged is book 2 coming out in the summer. But Deception, which is coming out on the 27th of February, is the story of one of the side characters. So Rose, who is one of our main characters, she's from our little Asia area, and she's a physics and math genius, but maybe a bit neglected by her mom, because her mom is a big rebel spy. And she's high up in not only the underground, but also in the city. And she finds out about a plot that has to get stopped. And so she travels to the underground's national headquarters, which is located deep in the Appalachian Mountains in the hollers of what is now Eastern Kentucky, in a saltpeter cave, which that is so cool. And I'd love to tell you more about that. And when she's there, the master of secrets herself gets bamboozled. And all of a sudden, her life is at risk. The story of Deception follows how Sophie gets out and is meant to be read after Divided. There are spoilers for Divided, but not for Caged, which is, I think, a very important thing. as as an internovel novella, and she'll rejoin the story within the pages of Caged. And so that's where she's been. She's been kind of off on her own.
That sounds super fun. So I didn't know, we didn't talk about my dystopian series when we talked last week, but I have a dystopian series, and in the second book, they're basically living in a cave in Kentucky. So I have
Oh my
researched
gosh.
those caves in Eastern Kentucky, like to the hilt as well. So yeah.
I love that. Oh my gosh, now I got to go get your series. Sorry, we're fangirling here. Can we just, we need a moment to fangirl, like forget about everybody else. I adore that area of the country because it's so isolated and you can be in one area and like never see someone from another area. Like it's really isolated. It's the perfect place for a rebel movement, I think.
Yeah, when I was picking, well, mine's futuristic and we have
Mhm.
climate change. So like the lower half of the United States is not even occupied anymore. Everybody's
Mhm.
moved north. And so they have to pick somewhere outside the borders. And this is the cave region where I found they could hide down in the caves without being detected. And then they have
Mhm.
a river beside them so they can get places. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was just the perfect place. So I agree.
And it's a lovely area.
I haven't been there yet. That's like one of the places in the country that I've driven through Ohio. Maybe I have driven through part of Kentucky, but that's one of the places like I want to go and visit because it just looks so magical.
Mhm. You absolutely have to. When you go, you need, if you can, time it for in May and go visit the Great Saltpeter Cave. It's an enormous cave system that formed out of saltpeter mining in the War of 1812. And there's a cavernous great room that makes an appearance, or something like it makes an appearance in Deception.
Oh,
And
cool.
I just love, we toured that as a family way back like a decade ago. And I was like, I have to put this in a book.
Fun. Well, definitely I'll have to look up yours and look up so my mind doesn't like come to the like exact name of the cave that I put in there. It's been a few years, but I will look that up and let you know that as well. So how did you come up with the idea for these books or the series?
So I was inspired by an all-night dream. It was in 2012, and we were supposed to be in post-racial America, and Trayvon Martin had just been killed. And no, we're not in post-racial America. And I was very disturbed. I was praying a lot. And one night I had this all-night dream where I saw our nation decades in the future divided into ethnic groups and walls between those ethnic groups, never interacting. And I saw also teenagers who were growing up in their areas, never having set foot in another area or having even interacted with someone who didn't look like them. And my heart just broke for them. We have this great multicultural blend in America. And what would it look like if we lost that? And that became the driving force behind the Divided series. I also met all the characters. So they just kind of introduced themselves to me and said, we need freedom and we need your help. I was like, okay, is this normal? I don't think this is normal, but I don't know. Maybe it is normal the more authors I talk to. So that was the inspiration and how I got started on Divided.
That sounds neat. I mean, it's a little bit Divergent-esque, right? Divergent was the one where they had the four sects, right?
Yes,
Depending on,
yes.
and yeah, it sounds like a little bit like that, but more
Mhm.
like hitting home of or reflecting our society now, maybe.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, I loved Divergent and The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, The Giver, like all those classic YA dystopian novels. And it's weird to say classic about something that was written 20 years ago, but I guess it's almost a classic. And I definitely took some cues from how they structured the narrative, especially not necessarily the first person point of view or confining to one person's point of view, but the idea of weaving hope and courage and this thread of survival all the way through the narrative is something I really wanted to do.
Neat.
Mhm.
And how did you decide that it was going to be first person from these four different characters?
So it's actually third person.
Third person.
And I decided it wasn't first person because that was confusing.
Right.
So I did third
Got it.
person. I do a limited point of view. And I wanted us to feel like we're kind of sitting on the shoulders of all of the protagonists, but also we can kind of see into their brains. And so we are definitely feeling what they feel, seeing what they see, but we're also limited to what they know, which I think is valuable because then you have the element of surprise and tension and conflict.
Yeah, because I guess I still pretty much primarily am a first person POV writer. And so like in my first dystopian, I went back and forth between the two main characters. But I didn't have four because that would be like, yeah, too confusing and maybe too choppy. So that sounds like a really neat novel. And so that's interesting too, because I don't know if we talked about my Kingdom Journals books last week, but they are first person, but in each book, it's written through the POV of a different person, but it makes the story, keeps the same story narrative going. So it's sort of the same feel, it seems like, as to that way of writing or a series.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely did that with choosing one character to advance the plot for each book rather than it feeling like everybody has that role. They're working together, but there's definitely a major in each of the books. And Marcos gets that starring role and divided. Then Rose is engaged, and then Harriet gets betrayed, and Jason gets united. So they each get their turn to kind of advance the plot. And that's the book that they tend to go through the most character development as well.
Right. That's neat. And probably you can hear their different voices, their different backgrounds coming through, and their different life experiences, but blending all those life experiences into, a force that hopefully that does not end up like Divergent. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that kind of upset me. No.
I think it's upset everyone, so we won't go there.
Yeah, we won't go there. Yes,
So
I literally threw my book across the room. So
yeah, me and my daughter read it together, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "What?" She was like, "No, I'm stopping." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm with you. We're done."
Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
She was like, "I read this whole huge long book for this."
Yep.
Like, oh, I'm so sorry, but this doesn't normally happen. So before this dream, were you an author, a writer? What is your background, or were you forced into it by this cataclysmic dream?
They kind of dragged me into it. I've written since I was a kid. I just never shared my fiction writing, at least. I was definitely more of a technical writer. I was in finance, and then I ran a nonprofit and lots of like developing marketing material and training manuals and all of the things that you need to run a company. And then with pastoring, there was always writing curriculum, writing Bible studies, what have you. So the nonfiction writing was my strength, and I will say a comfort zone. To be stretched into fiction writing, I had never written anything longer than like a short story. And to tackle a series was a bit daunting in my mind at first. Now, maybe there are some writers out there that are just built different and they can start their first novel and it turns into a series and there's no problem. I was not one of those. My first draft was abysmal. My second draft was not much better. Finally, by the fifth draft, I was like, okay, I think this is ready. And then developmental edit. I had it in 3 books because I was like bound and determined I'm gonna be a trilogy. Problem is, when you have 4 main characters, then you're shorting 2 characters. They have to share. And I was like, this doesn't fit. It's not working. And she's like, just split it. And so we split the first book into 2, and it's just been a much better process since then. And layering in like things like world building and characterization was something I've had to learn, but it's been a joy and has actually been kind of fun to do. So it's been a journey, but it's not one that I would have traded.
Yeah, I was going to say we have very similar backgrounds because my background is technical scientific writing, and when I jumped into this whole fiction thing, at first it was kind of just a hobby that I kind of felt that I had to do. And then it just became this whole world, and now I can't get out of it. So
Same. They dragged me into it and now they won't let me go. And now I'm getting ideas for the next series already. I
so
know.
have you written, it sounds like you've written all 4 books and are just releasing them.
So I've written them all. I've written to the end. And I think that's an important thing, a tool for anyone who's writing a series. Just write to the end, because it's going to be your first draft and you're going to trash it anyway. And then you can go back and make sure that you see things like Easter eggs and foreshadowing and all that, make sure the character growth is right, the plot makes sense the whole way through. So I've written to the end, but the last 2 books are probably in the roughest shape. Caged has gone through several rounds of edits, and I'm now on my like pre-copy edit, revision, and honing, and that will go to the copy editor in a couple weeks. So I got a lot on my
That's
plate.
probably a big push right now then.
It is. It is. I was working on it this morning.
That's a really good thing to bring up
Mhm.
about series, because I now looking back, I would do that, but I didn't do that. And there were a couple of things that I was like, oh, I
Mhm.
made this law about this world and I can't break this law. So I need to write around
Mhm.
how those characters solve this
Mhm.
without breaking the law of the world. So yeah, I think in hindsight, it would have been good to do that, at least in a rough
Mhm.
form like you are. Not maybe it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be perfect, but
Yeah.
because I didn't know where they were going. Like I
Mhm.
knew they had to get rid of the evil person, but
Mhm.
getting them there was a challenge.
I think it's especially important for fantasy and sci-fi that's not based on this world, that you write to the end, because just like you're saying, sometimes when you get to a place and you realize you've written yourself into a corner, then what do you do? And you've got all these books that are already published. I encountered something like that at the end. So before I'd even released Divided, because I'd written to the end, I was able to go back and fix it. And I can't spoil what that is. So it is, but it's a major, major plot point that if I hadn't fixed it, I would have been in trouble. And I think that's a very common issue that writers can have when they're writing a multi-book series.
Tell me your favorite part of being an author.
I think talking to readers, there's this, I tell this story about a former coworker of my husband, and she's in her 60s, and you don't think she's going to be reading YA dystopian. As soon as my books came out, she got them, and she just started gushing about them. Then she convinced her book club to read them. It's a bunch of older ladies at their church. I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Yeah, it's fine, it's clean, they'll be fine. Like, I'm just like, wow, do they ever read dystopian? I'm thinking, and they loved it. So I'm just amazed. And then I read all my reviews, even the 1 stars. And I think it's important to hear how our work is impacting readers, and how they're reading our work in a
Right.
real close way. So I think that's probably my favorite. I love in-person events. I love selling um, in person. I'm not a huge salesperson, so I was really surprised that I like that. But I think it's the readers that do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love, I mean, I don't like saying to them, will you buy my book? But I love telling them about my
Mhm.
world and my story and my characters, because I
Mhm.
get very involved with those people. So
Mhm. I just get them into my world. Like, if they're not into dystopian or upheaval, the prequel is more post-apocalyptic, then just move on, whatever. But if that's something that they're open to, if they're not going to purchase right then, I just get them into my world with upheaval and get them on my newsletter list, and we'll get to know each other.
fun. And so is that people a free short story that's available?
It is. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon, but why? Why? Why give Amazon that money? Although it's nice. Yeah, it's available on my website, ccrobinsonauthor.com. Sign up for the Underground. The Underground is our rebel movement. Sign up for the Underground newsletter, become part of the movement, and you get upheaval.
That's a lot of fun. I love all those, like you're the underground movement. So sounds like a lot of
Mhm.
fun. I will definitely go sign up. I will be part of your underground.
Yay.
So you talked about another series. I mean, what are you gonna, is it gonna
Mhm.
be the same dystopian?
It's going to be dystopian. It's likely going to feel a little more like Kurt Vonnegut. So I don't know if we're crossing into the adult space or if we're dealing with a teenage. I would prefer a teenage protagonist because I think it's such a wonderful time of life. There are some, I will say, purported mental health issues that are not actually real, but we'll get to that. And it is how this character deals with it and where he gets sent. And so it's maybe a little bit more mature than a typical YA. I put it at the high end of YA. But that's been a concept kind of floating around in my brain. I was trying to squeeze it into a short story for an anthology, and it's not behaving.
Oh, well, it will. Maybe you have to finish this one first and then.
I think I need to finish it. That's what I told the anthology coordinator. I was like, this is not going to be in the word count you want. It's going to be a lot longer. So I have a feeling it's probably going to be a duology by the time I'm done. It needs a little bit more depth and a little bit more treatment of, especially about the mental health aspects.
Yeah, those are hard sometimes. But
Yes.
I feel like Divided is also maybe upper YA because Marcos is 18, right? What are the ages of the other main characters?
Yes, they're all 18. It feels more upper YA to me as well at times with the violence, but there's no sexual content. And so that kind of maybe straddles that mid YA. I did have some readers, some early readers who are in the like 12 to 14 range, and they loved it and their parents loved it with them. So that told me, okay, they're reading other books that are similar to this. And The Giver is a 6th grade read in our school district. I mean, that's a 12-year-old, and there's some pretty tough stuff in that. So I think, it could flex down into that younger YA for those who've already been exposed to The Giver or other dystopian novels.
Right. That was what I was going to kind of say about your story of your 60-year-old book club, because I mean, those historically, I mean, The Handmaid's Tale is a very old book that, well, I shouldn't say it's published a long time ago, and it's been like a top dystopian book for a very long time. Giver has been around a long time. So people that like that genre then maybe always like that genre. Yeah, my mother-in-law was so funny. I have a fae fantasy series, which I never thought I'd write. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite one. I never thought I'd like fairies. And I said, oh, wow, you would have never known, right? So
I could see myself going into some of the fantasy genres eventually. I don't want to do it right now. I've got too many dystopian ideas and even post-apocalyptic ideas kind of rumbling around in my brain. So we'll give them some time to get out.
Neat.
But there's some fantasy back there too.
Well, that's okay. We love you still. Well, fun. Tell us about where we can find you. You told us a little bit about that, but where can we find you? Where we can we get your books?
The best place to connect with me is going to be on my website at ccrobinsonauthor.com. You can buy signed paperbacks there. There's links to all the stores there as well, and find out more information, see all of my many media appearances. All of that is there. And I'm on all the socials at CC Robinson Author. So,
well, thank you so much for being here, and we will definitely have to have you back in the summer. I want to hear all about the next book.
I'm so excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.